Hot-Headed, Chapter 1, by Mufi Kitten. Uraraka Ochako was in love with Midoriya Izuku. She had known since her first year in UA. When had been the first time she'd realised? When Aoyama had confronted her about it during their test to fight against a pro hero, maybe? But maybe she'd also kind of felt it even earlier. Maybe some when Deku had worked with her in class, training as heroes versus Bakugo and Ida's villains. Maybe even a little when he'd saved her from being crushed by a huge robot during their entrance exams. It wasn't exactly clear when Ochako had come to know it to be true, but she knew it had been in her first year, and she knew her feelings had never changed since then. She had changed, of course, physically and mentally. It was the beginning of third year, and she had filled out a bit more, but also packed on a lot more muscle. Her body had once been soft and petite, and while she was still a petite girl, she had trained hard to become a hero, which had granted her washboard stomach, nearly a six-pack peeking through. Her arms and legs were far more toned. Her face was not quite as round. She had grown a couple inches and now stood a solid 5'4". Still not tall, but taller. The golden brown hair had once always been in a short bob, which she finally realised lent to her face seeming so round. So sometime in second year she decided to grow it out, and now came to around her armpits, when she had it down. But most days she kept it up in a ponytail, letting a few locks still fall around her face. She'd cut her bangs a few months ago, but now was also growing them out again, and they were more side-swept. Ochako walked onto UA campus with a suitcase stuffed to the max with clothes and a few personal belongings she'd received from her family over the short spring break. She didn't know why her mum insisted she bring all of these clothes when most days she wore her school uniform or a hero suit. You should still wear something cute when you get the chance, her mother's voice sounded in her head. She'd insisted Ochako wear the floral printed sundress she sported today. She rolled her eyes but smiled, thinking of her doting parents. Today was Sunday, the day before the first day of school and move-in day for their dorms. Sure, it had only been a couple of weeks since they had gone on break, but this was also the beginning of their third and final year as heroes in training at UA. This year would be all about prepping them to go out in the real world and be heroes they'd always dreamed of. It was crunch time, and very last chance to possibly tell Midoriya how she felt about him. Other students were also arriving on campus, some from her class, other second years, and even a handful of wide-eyed first years. She waved and exchanged greetings with Momo, who still looked much the same with her tall frame and messy bun she wore her hair in, then with Kyoko, who had also grown her hair out over the past couple of years, but had shaved one side for a pretty extreme but still totally Jiro Kyoko look. In most normal schools, hair that wouldn't be acceptable like that, but this was UA. It was a good thing to stand out, and most importantly, to be yourself. She expressly ignored Mineta as she walked past him, despite his friendly wave. Every girl did. He had actually managed to grow by leaps and bounds since first year, but was still a few inches shorter than even Ochako. And even if he had sprouted up to 6 foot and somehow filled out with a handsome face, which he hadn't on the either count, he still would be a nasty pervert of such a sad and desperate nature that the girls all over school would feel uncomfortable around. Ochako trekked across campus towards her new third year. She still couldn't believe it. Third year. Dormitories. There were cherry trees in bloom along most walkways. It was almost like living in a fairy tale, she thought. Something magical was in the air when cherry blossoms bloomed. Then she stopped short on the path up to the dormitory building. Midoriya, Deku, her mind supplied more readily, was standing near the entrance to the dorms with an odd look on his face. His face was drawn, tense, almost angry, looking at the ground. Standing in front of him, a little too close to be casual, and leaning toward Deku in a clearly menacing manner, was Bakugo. He had to have just said something truly horrific for Deku to have been affected this way, since he'd gotten used to Bakugo's hurtful jabs a long time ago. What could he possibly have said? Why did Deku look like this? She could only see Deku's expressions as he faced her. Bakugo's back was turned to her. She didn't know what kind of face Bakugo was making, but she would bet he would probably a smug smile on that jerky face of his. Why did he always have to antagonize Deku? He seemed to have gotten over his inferiority complex about Deku a while back, but he still seemed to just enjoy being mean sometimes and looking down on everyone. He didn't even have a halfway decent reason anymore. He just liked it. Ochako felt herself getting hot. She was not the same passive and confident girl that had started UA. She knew what she was capable of. She wasn't afraid of confrontation any longer. She'd experienced enough of it over her many encounters with League of Villains and other classes and heroes along, always trying to show her up or put her down. She had become sure of herself. She was ready to be a hero, wanted to be a hero, and heroes didn't back down from a fight or ignore when their friends were in trouble. She was tired of bullying and cruel nature. It was third year, their last year here. Things were going to be different. This wasn't going to go on any longer. She would make sure of it. What's going on here? Ochako said with an authoritative tone she was proud to find. Deku started and raised his emerald eyes to her in surprise, if anything, getting even tenser. He'd grown so much since his first year here. He'd still looked boyish when they'd all started out together, but he'd worked harder than anyone and reaped the most benefits. He'd naturally grown taller, and was at a near 5'11" now, his muscles thick and numerous. He'd always looked up to All Might, wanted to be just like him, it seemed like, and with a quirk like his, it seemed incredibly likely that he could be. He wasn't quite as layered in muscle as All Might had been in his prime, but Deku had never had the same meaty frame to start with. It seemed like if he hadn't worked toward toning himself, he would have been a wiry guy. Now he was long-limbed and muscular to the point of being quite attractive, in her opinion, although she knew a few other girls that hadn't taken notice too. Even Eri clearly had a cute schoolgirl crush on him, but not over the top. He'd cropped his unruly hair closer to his head, but still let it be wild. Ochako doubted it could really be tamed. He looked at her now with a slight expression of shock, his jaw still clenched, looking like he wanted to say something, but was unable to. She knew he could also read her expression of fury. Her face was likely beet red with how her anger had heated her all over. "Do you want something, round-face?" Bakugo muttered and slowly turned his head towards her, his crimson eyes blazing, a fierce look about him. Although honestly, when did he not look fierce? He didn't seem to have a smirk on his face, as she had assumed, but it was possible he had wiped it off when she'd interrupted his little torture session. Ochako hesitated a second, her old unsure self rearing its head in her mind. He was her classmate. Should she really confront him? He was strong, and his temper was short. He had never fully focused his eye onto her. He mostly picked on Deku, and absolutely masochist boys who liked to be around him and call themselves his friends. He wasn't above laying into girls, or fighting them for that matter, as she recalled her battle with him so long ago at the UA Sports Festival tournament. But he had not yet truly been hurtful to her. Did she want to pick this fight and put herself on his radar like that? She looked at Deku again, another odd expression on his face. His features were still stressed, but his eyes were intensely set on her, like he was trying to laser a message into her brain with just a look. A part of her warmly sighed within her. His heart was always on his sleeve. He would never have that poker face the teachers were always admonishing him about. She didn't like seeing him upset like this. He was worth this fight. "Yeah, Bakugo," she replied with a single wobble in her voice. "I want to know why you're always picking on Deku." Bakugo looked at Deku a second, then finally turned his body around to fully face her. His eyes narrowed at her. He also seemed to wear his heart mostly on his sleeve. His was just full of malice there, as far as she could see. "I don't see why this is your business, Pink Cheeks." Pink Cheeks, she scoffed inwardly, always with the names. She set her mouth in a hard line. "It's Uraraka-san to you, Bakugo. And of course it's my business, what you're saying to my friend when you're bullying them." His head tilted very slightly. This was not a behaviour he expected from her. "And what are you going to do about it, Pink Cheeks? Make me float?" Make some more rocks fall on me? Ochako's blood pressure hitched a bit higher. What an asshole, she thought to herself. He couldn't have known how crushing his defeat over her had been their first year, but he had to have known it stung at least. And he'd just thrown it in her face. I'm not going to fight you, Bakugo, but I also won't back down from you. Deku has never wanted to be your enemy, and you still treat him like scum of the earth after all this time. Even when you know he could beat you in a fight any time, any place. You're pathetic. Electricity surged through her body the more she spoke. It felt like it was reinforcing her spine, giving her more and more confidence, lowering her further and further. Bakugo's eyes widened a bit in shock and a lot in rage. His face flushed and he bared his teeth. She could tell this was about to get nasty. What the fuck did you just say, Floaty? He asked in a low voice. One could say it sounded calm if they didn't know this was how it got before all hell broke loose. Pulling out all the pretty names because you can't refute me, she shot back, her adrenaline pumping and giving her a high she'd never known before. Her eyes blazed, her skin was hot. She'd never felt this confident in her life. He took a step towards her. You little Deku. Blessed Deku. Ochako had nearly forgotten him, reached out to place a hand on Bakugo's shoulder. Kachan, he said, his face no longer tense or stressed but determined and serious. Bakugo halted only momentarily to smack his hand away. Don't touch me, Deku. He spat the name out like it had left a bad taste in his mouth. It was obviously still an insult in his mind. Ochako knew she was digging herself further, but this feeling, this power she felt standing up to Bakugo, was like nothing she'd ever known before. No, don't, Deku, she said, shooting him an I got you look. I can handle him. Like hell you can, Pink Cheeks. Your face is so pink right now you look like a balloon with that round little face of yours. Bakugo countered, his eyes glowing like lava, continuing his approach towards her. What, you scared of me? Regretting opening your mouth? Other students, including Momo, Kyoko, and Mineta, had stopped near them to see what was going on. Most in their year hardly even noticed when Bakugo started yelling anymore, but Uraraka, the kind, sweet, shy, never did anything wrong, always tried to please others Uraraka confronting Bakugo, that was more of a show. Mineta took his phone out, seemingly to record this. Ochako didn't feel any of the things he thought she did. She would prove it. I'm not scared of anything, Bakugo. What are you going to do? Attack me? Because that's all you can do to get back at me. Like I said, you're pathetic. I'm tired of having to tiptoe around you to keep you from going off. Deku is a good person. He never wanted to fight with you. He's even gotten used to your sour attacks. What did you say to him this time? I saw his face. I can't stand how you treat people. You even treat your friends like crap. Why are you so cruel? He never stopped walking towards her the entire time. Her tirade continued. His eyes still flashing with danger, his mouth set in a sneer. As she finished, he loomed up closer and closer to her and came to a stop maybe a foot away, knowing how intimidatingly intrude on her personal space. He was huge. Deku had grown a lot in the years they had been in school, but Bakugo had become near beastly. He had to be just over 6 feet tall now. He had gotten 2 rings in his right ear at some point in second year. Everyone had oohed and ahed over them, talking about how much cooler he looked with them. Not too surprising, considering his bad boy image. Over the break, he had shorn his hair down at the sides so it was extremely short and his hair on top was longer, although still a little shorter than he'd once had it. He exuded power, even wearing casual clothes, a tank top and cargo pants. He truly was a frightening form. But Uraraka had dealt with him for so long and was too angry to back down or feel fear. She looked up at him, not stepping back, but widening her stance to be prepared for whatever came next. He leaned closer to her, looming over her so she could see just how overpowered she really was. You don't know what you've just started, Pinky, he growled harshly, his eyes looking hungry, insatiable, devouring. Ochako's spine went cold. Reality was coming back now. What had she done? Dread filled her, but she hardened her face. She couldn't let her discomfort show. You think I'm cruel? You can't stand me? You don't know anything yet. Kacchako bared his teeth in something between a smile and a leer. Thanks for finally being honest. Get ready for a world of regret. And he flicked her on the forehead. Hard. Ochako covered her stinging forehead immediately, tears pricking the corner of her eyes. Catch! Deku started toward them. Shut up, loser, Kacchako cut him off, then stood back at his full height and strode away towards the dorms. Deku went to her, pulled her hand away from her face. Uraraka-chan, are you okay? Do you need to see Recovery Girl? He shouldn't have hurt you like that. I'll try to talk to him. The few of the students who had gathered dispersed, some whispering to each other about what they'd just witnessed. Kyoka and Momo had worried looks on their faces. Mineta was looking at his phone with a grin. Ochako didn't say anything. She stewed in her thoughts. She had wanted to stand up for herself and her friend, but now Kacchako had all but said he was about to ruin her life. Had she just made a huge mistake? God, but just that little flick had hurt. That high she had been feeling only moments before petered out. A part of her felt regret, and a bit of fear about what might be coming for her. Another minuscule, near unrecognisable part of her hardened itself and thought, fucking bring it, explodey boy.